In this lesson, we're going to look at a more advanced concept regarding short-run Phillips curve, and that's its relationship to aggregate supply. So we're going to start off by drawing our Phillips curve here. This is going to be our inflation rate, our unemployment level, and we'll just have our regular downward sloping curve, which I'm going to label Srpc. And again, emphasizing that when the inflation rate is high, unemployment tends to be low, and when the unemployment rate is high, inflation tends to be low. So that's our starting point. Now, how does this relate to the aggregate supply and demand model? Now, here we're going to make some adjustments. Now, first of all, this is a price level on the lower set of axes. There is a difference between the price level and the inflation rate, as in this is an index score, for example, like CPI. And this is actually a percentage, like the inflation rate, say 5%, or something along those lines. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go, that there is a difference between saying price level and saying inflation rate. They're not quite the same thing. Okay, so on our ASAD diagram, we're aware that price level is the x-axis or y-axis, and the x-axis is real GDP. And for now, we're just going to draw aggregate supply and aggregate demand and long-run aggregate supply. So we'll do our potential output, or long-run aggregate supply. And we have our short-run aggregate supply. And, sorry, that looks bad. And then we have aggregate demand. And remember, whenever you label AD that first time, always take the time to write C plus I plus G plus XN to convey to the grader that you know where AD comes from. Okay, so this is a basic macroeconomy in equilibrium. Now let's just take a look at how these things relate to each other between the top and bottom graph. So in the standard ASAD diagram, let's suppose that AD had shifted and we were producing now at AD1. Well, as compared with our original point, what kinds of things do we see? First of all, we would see that the price level has gone up. The other thing that we would see is that our output has gone up. Now, one of the things that's important about this is that GDP and, as you know, unemployment are inversely related. So as GDP goes up, then unemployment goes down. But you also see that as GDP goes up, in other words, as we produce more along this axis, we experience higher inflation rates. So you can see on the aggregate supply curve that when there is high rates of inflation, we usually see low levels of unemployment. Again, this would be below the natural rate right here. And on the other hand, during periods where unemployment is very high, for example, if we had an intersection of AS and AD here, where we would see very high unemployment because we have a low level of production, we would see also, though, a lower price level. So what you can really get to in the end is that the aggregate supply curve and the short-run Phillips curve are mirror images of each other. Okay, let's do a quick review of this, but without all of the mess on screen. So go back to our labels. We have our inflation rate, we have our price level for our two y-axes, we have the unemployment rate, and we have real GDP for our x-axes. Short-run Phillips curve, as we know, is going to look like this. And the short-run aggregate supply curve is going to look like this. So, as we know from the last slide, and I encourage you to try drawing this and add in the potential output and aggregate demand if you're not seeing it, but that each time, if you can imagine the different ADs, right, the different AD1, AD2, AD3, AD4, as we work our way along the aggregate supply curve, GDP is up, and therefore unemployment is going down, but also we can see as we work our way up, the price level is climbing. So what we really see in the end is that the short-run Phillips curve, the short-run aggregate supply curve and the short-run Phillips curve are actually mirror images of each other.